Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sherlock Holmes. Now I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case, right? Let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. Story 1. Crystal McDowell's life was full of turmoil and adversary from the beginning. Born to parents who had named her after the drug crystal meth, she faced a challenging childhood. Her parents, who died within 6 months of each other when Crystal was just 11 years old, succumbed to complications from AIDS which they contracted through substance abuse. This tragic loss left Crystal orphaned and left to fend for herself. In her teenage years, Crystal faced even more hardship. She was abducted by a man and held captive in a chicken coop where she was sexually assaulted for several days. However, Crystal displayed incredible strength and resilience, escaping and evading her captor eventually. Crystal made her way to Baytown, Texas, where she found refuge with her aunt and uncle. Despite enduring the abuse she suffered as a child, Crystal was determined to make a better life for herself. She worked tirelessly to overcome her struggles and break free from the shackles of her past. It was in Baytown that Crystal met Steve McDowell. Steve, known for his playful nature and love for video games and fast cars, was everything Crystal longed for. His sweet, kind, and funny demeanor won her over instantly. Crystal's friends couldn't help but notice how happy she seemed to be with Steve. They thought Crystal and Steve made a perfect couple. Crystal worked as a flight attendant with Express Jet, which allowed her and Steve to take frequent trips all over the USA, enjoying the benefits of her airline perks. After they married, Crystal and Steve had 2 children, Madden and Maui. It was evident that Crystal loved them deeply. She was a dedicated mother who prioritized her children's happiness and well-being. From the outside, it appeared that Crystal and Steve and their children were the perfect family. However, hidden beneath the surface, Crystal was growing increasingly dissatisfied with her marriage. After 10 years of marriage, she decided to end her relationship with Steve. This decision was met with resistance from her husband, who did not like the idea of a divorce. While Crystal waited for the keys to her new home, which was being remodeled, she continued to live with Steve and their children. It was a challenging situation for all of them as they navigated the emotions of a pending divorce. Despite the difficulties, Crystal remained determined to create a better future for herself and her children. By 2017, Crystal had turned 37 years old. She had made significant changes in her life, pursuing a career in real estate. This time marked a new chapter for Crystal as she was looking forward to new beginnings in her new home. On August 25, 2017, Crystal had plans to meet up with her family to watch the highly anticipated Mayweather and McGregor fight. Excitement was in the air as friends and family gathered to watch the highly anticipated match. However, Crystal never showed up initially. No one seemed to worry too much about Crystal's absence. They knew that she was busy juggling her responsibilities as a working mother. Perhaps she was just running late or had encountered some unexpected circumstances. However, as the night went on and Crystal failed to reply to texts and calls, concerns started to grow. After waiting more than 24 hours without hearing from Crystal, her family made a heartbreaking decision. They contacted the Chambers County Sheriff's Department to report her missing. A deputy was immediately dispatched to Crystal's home, where he questioned her ex-husband Steve. Upon his arrival, the deputy questioned Steve about Crystal's whereabouts. Steve, who had recently been divorced from Crystal, informed the detectives that Crystal had begun a new relationship. After their separation, he said that there were nights when Crystal would disappear without informing him of her whereabouts. As he spoke to Steve, something in his tone caught the detective's attention. The deputy, with his keen intuition, had suspicions about Steve. With mounting concern, the deputy decided to call for backup. A seasoned detective arrived at the scene and joined the deputy upon speaking with Steve. The detective noticed his wedding band still on his finger. This odd detail piqued his interest, as Crystal and Steve had been divorced for 6 months. Although Steve was cooperative, the detective noticed something off about his demeanor. Given the unusual circumstances surrounding Crystal's disappearance, the detective involved the district attorney. The district attorney, having read the reports, immediately suspected foul play, with mounting evidence pointing towards a possible homicide. She ordered further investigation. One fact that caught the district attorney's attention was that Crystal and Steve were divorced, yet still living together. Furthermore, Crystal had a new boyfriend. The DA's first thought was that Steve had something to hide. Despite the initial speculation, the detective on this case had a different option. While it was possible that Steve could have played a role in Crystal's disappearance, the detective believed there were other factors to consider. The detective believed that Crystal's boyfriend could provide valuable insight into her disappearance. Crystal's disappearance puzzled the detectives as they sought to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. They learned that the man she had gone out with on August 24, 2017 was Paul Hargrave, a local man who managed a jeweler, a store that had been a fixture in the neighborhood for over 50 years. According to Paul, he and Crystal had gone out together that night, and upon her return, she went back to his house with him the following morning while Paul was in the shower. Crystal left his home. Paul provided security camera footage of Crystal leaving his residence on August 25th at 7:35 a.m. The video showed Crystal getting into a black Mercedes coupe and driving away from Paul's driveway. Steve McDowell and Paul Hargrave were immediately considered suspects in Crystal's disappearance. However, the detectives realized that other potential persons of interest still needed to be investigated further. As the detectives delved into the case, they discovered some intriguing details about Crystal's marriage. It was discovered that throughout her marriage, Crystal had engaged in multiple extramarital affairs with flight attendants and pilots, both male and female. The discovery of these extramarital affairs raised suspicions among the detectives. They wondered if there was a possibility that an angry spouse had gone after Crystal seeking revenge. However, there was no evidence that these affairs had anything to do with her disappearance. The investigation into Crystal's disappearance hit a dead end when Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Baytown. This massive storm caused widespread devastation, with half the county submerged in floodwaters. The heavy rain continued for days, making it difficult for the investigation to proceed. Crystal's disappearance became overshadowed by the hurricane and its aftermath. People lost their homes, cars, and even their lives in the storm's destruction. The Chambers County Sheriff's Department faced limited resources and was forced to redirect all personnel to assist in the hurricane search and rescue efforts, with the attention of the officers supposed to be working on Crystal's case diverted to the hurricane response. Her family was responsible for picking up the investigation. Friends and family members spent the days tirelessly sharing posts about Crystal's disappearance on various social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. They spread the word far and wide, hoping to gather any leads or information that would lead to her whereabouts. One of Crystal's cousins received a message from a friend. The friend informed them that they had recently seen a Snapchat image depicting Crystal's vehicle parked in a Motel 6 parking lot near Interstate 10. Intrigued by this claim, Crystal's cousin immediately sought to verify the information. Upon seeing the Snapchat image, they recognized the license plate and confirmed that it was indeed Crystal's car. With the confirmation, Crystal's cousin immediately informed her family and the police about the potential lead. However, due to severe flooding on the roads in Chambers County, reaching the site of the motel proved challenging. Instead of traditional vehicles, they opted to use airboats to navigate through the flooded areas. Upon arriving at Motel 6, Crystal's family and the police were met with sight that confirmed their worst fears. Her car was parked haphazard in the parking lot with the keys in the ignition. It appeared that whoever left Crystal's car there did so with the intention of having it stolen. The Mercedes was subsequently towed to the crime lab garage for processing, but regrettably, no evidence was found that could shed light on Crystal's whereabouts. Even D-Line, the popular news television investigation series, dedicated segments to Crystal's disappearance, but unfortunately, these efforts did not yield any relevant information. 1 week after Crystal's disappearance, the detective realized he needed additional assistance. In the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, he reached out to the Texas Rangers, who gladly provided their assistance. The lead Texas Rangers assigned to the case conducted the first formal interview with Steve McDowell, Crystal's husband. Steve stated that he had not seen Crystal since she had left for her date on August 24th. From the very beginning, Steve's body language appeared peculiar to the Ranger. Despite Crystal's sudden disappearance, Steve did not exhibit the palpable worry one would expect from someone in such a situation. However, Crystal's friends and family remained steadfast in their support of Steve Crystals. Loved ones knew Steve personally and felt that he could not possibly be responsible for Crystal's disappearance. They emphasized his loving nature as a father to Madden and Maui, doubting that he would ever do anything to hurt their mother. The ranger approached Steve and asked if he would be willing to take a lie detector test. Steve agreed, seemingly confident in his innocence. However, the results of the test were shocking. Steve failed miserably. Raising even more questions about his involvement in Crystal's disappearance, Paul Hargrave, Crystal's boyfriend, who was also considered a potential suspect, also took a polygraph test just like Steve. Paul failed the lie detector test. With both Steve and Paul failing the lie detector test, the district attorney started to wonder if there was a possible joint effort to conceal the truth about Crystal's disappearance. By this stage, everyone involved was convinced that foul play was involved and that Crystal was deceased. However, there was one important question that remained unanswered. Where was her body if her remains had been disposed of in one of the bayous in Baytown? There was a high likelihood that her body would have been transported to the Gulf of Mexico, making it virtually impossible to discover in an effort to locate Crystal and bring closure to her family. A search was organized that involved Texas EA search team and volunteers. The search took place on September 9th, with close to 100 people participating in the search efforts. The searchers adopted a grid-based approach, dividing the area into sections and systematically covering each foot by ATV and airboat. Despite the extensive efforts put forth by everyone involved, no sign of Crystal could be found. As the search continued into the wetlands, the Texas Rangers remained steadfast in their determination to find those responsible for Crystal's disappearance. They worked tirelessly to piece together the events and piece together a potential motive behind Crystal's disappearance. The possibility arose that her ex-husband or her boyfriend could have been involved, although no evidence was found to support this theory. The ranger, recognizing the potential for CCTV footage, had officers canvass the area around the motel where her car was discovered, searching for homes and businesses equipped with security cameras. Fortunately, several establishments had security cameras, and the ranger was determined to uncover any footage that might help shed light on Crystal's disappearance. After spending hours searching through countless hours of footage, the ranger came across footage of a person parking Crystal's car in the motel park lot on Saturday, August 26th at 6:37 a.m. The footage provided a clear image of the man, but the ranger couldn't immediately identify the person. As the ranger continued his analysis of the footage, he noticed that the man in question got out of Crystal's Mercedes and walked away from the vehicle with the suspicion that this person could be Crystal's ex-husband. Steve, the ranger's attention intensified in a separate video, captured 5 hours later by a different security camera. A blue car pulled into the pump at a gas station located next to Motel 6, and this blue car, a rare Mustang GT, matched the description of Steve McDowell's vehicle. That revelation strengthened the ranger's belief that the person seen parking Crystal's car at Motel 6 could have been Steve himself. Steve's actions at the gas station raised suspicion instead of filling his tank. Steve walked towards the Motel 6 parking lot where he appeared to be looking at Crystal's car. The ranger speculated that Steve may have returned to the parking lot earlier to check if anyone had stolen Crystal's car. He had left the keys in the ignition, expecting someone to eventually take advantage and steal the vehicle if Steve was responsible for her disappearance. How did he return home? The distance between the location where Steve parked Crystal's car and his home is significant, and Steve would have been on foot, making this an unlikely journey. So the ranger decided to take a closer look at the CCTV footage from surrounding businesses and homes to find any additional 150 clues. Upon further investigation, the ranger discovered footage of a man riding a bike in the rain along the Interstate 10 service road at 7:05 a.m. approximately 25 minutes after Crystal's car was left in the parking lot. This bike had distinctive mag wheels and reminded the ranger of a similar bike he had seen in the McDowell garage during one of his interviews with the ranger. Steve mentioned that he had been shopping at Walmart on Saturday morning. The ranger, intrigued, decided to review the CCTV footage from the store. This footage from Walmart, located across the street from Motel 6, revealed A peculiar sequence of events: a man resembling Steve was seen arriving at Walmart Saturday morning in a hooded sweatshirt, paying for a bike with mag wheels and cash. Just minutes after Crystal's vehicle was abandoned in the Motel 6 lot. Upon reviewing this evidence, the ranger decided to summon Steve back to the police department for a follow-up interview during their encounter. The ranger confronted Steve with all the evidence they had gathered against him. However, Steve denied any involvement in Crystal's disappearance. Despite the denial, the ranger remained convinced that Steve was the killer. He was positive Paul Hargrave was innocent, and Steve was solely responsible for Crystal's disappearance. While the ranger believed they had sufficient evidence to charge Steve with murder, there was one crucial piece of evidence they still lacked. Crystal's body. The lack of physical remains hindered their efforts to establish a watertight case against Steve. One of the main reasons why the DA wanted to find Crystal's body was to secure a guilty verdict for murder. Without a body, proving a murder charge can be more challenging, as it relies on circumstantial evidence and witness statements. Having a physical body would strengthen the DA's case and provide concrete evidence to convince a jury. Furthermore, locating Crystal's body was crucial for the well-being of her family. Her loved ones deserved closure and needed to know what happened to her. The absence of answers was causing immense distress, and locating Crystal's remains would provide some relief in answers to their questions. Another factor that influenced the DA's decision to locate Crystal's body was a series of disturbing statements made by her ex-husband, Steve. People had informed the Texas Ranger that after Crystal filed for divorce, Steve made alarming comments about murder and taking his own life. The Ranger and the DA were concerned for the safety of Crystal and Steve's children, Madden and Maui. Given the potential dangers, the DA made the decision to remove the children from their father's custody and place them in protective services in order to convince Steve to cooperate. The DA presented him with a counteroffer. The DA stated that if Steve was willing to take them to Crystal's body, they could reconsider allowing him to see his children again. However, Steve had a different proposal. He asked if he could go home that night and the following morning, promising that he would tell them everything and lead them directly to Crystal's body. This offer by Steve posed a dilemma for the DA. On one hand, it provided an opportunity to potentially find Crystal's body and uncover the truth. However, on the other hand, it would depend on Steve's reliability and willingness to cooperate with a verbal agreement. The district attorney allowed Steve to return home that night, knowing they were taking a risk. The possibility existed that Steve might flee or harm himself, effectively leaving Crystal's fate unknown. However, the next morning on September 9th, the DA and the Texas Ranger arrived at Steve's home. Steve answered the door, and during his interview with the Ranger and the DA, he shared his version of the events. Steve revealed that he was aware of Crystal's numerous affairs throughout their marriage. When he confronted her about these issues, Crystal made it clear that she wanted him to stay out of her business. According to Steve, Crystal told him that she had sought sex outside of the marriage because she felt he was not dominant enough in the bedroom. As the Ranger and the DA sought information about the day Crystal went missing, they employed a sympathetic approach to elicit a confession from Steve. The Ranger feigned empathy, hoping to create an environment that allowed Steve to feel comfortable and relaxed. They intended to obtain crucial details about what actually happened to Crystal on that fateful day. Despite their efforts, Steve remained tight-lipped about Crystal's disappearance. Eventually, Steve confessed. According to Steve, before her disappearance, Steve and Crystal had a heated argument. Crystal revealed to Steve that she no longer loved him, leading to a confrontation. Steve, reacting impulsively, admitted to suffocating Crystal. However, he claimed that he never intended to harm her and that the incident was purely accidental following Crystal's death. Steve took immediate action to conceal her remains. Steve confessed he wrapped her body in trash bags, placing it in the trunk of her Mercedes. He then drove to a secluded location where he threw Crystal's lifeless body into a ravine. Steve's willingness to lead the authorities to Crystal's body seemed to offer a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. To the jury, the DA found himself worrying about the possibility of mistrial. The jury's request to review Steve's confession video further heightened these concerns. A mistrial would mean starting the entire process over again, a prospect that weighed heavily on the prosecution's mind. 1 hour after the jury requested to see the footage, they returned and their verdict was delivered. Jurors found Steve guilty of murder, delivering justice for Crystal. This guilty verdict brought a measure of closure to her family and loved ones who had been left searching for answers amidst the darkness that enveloped their lives. During the sentencing phase, the defense put forth the argument that Crystal's murder was a sudden passion, an attempt to reduce the severity of Steve's punishment. However, the jury rejected this claim, choosing to uphold the severity of the crime. Steve was sentenced to serve a 50-year prison sentence, Story 2, on June 20, 2001, at 9:48 a.m. in Houston, Texas. The law enforcement authorities received a call from a woman named Andrea Yates, who told the operator that she was ill and needed a police officer at her house. However, when the police officers arrived at Yates's house, they discovered something horrifying. Yates was seemingly well, but all her 5 children were laying dead in front of her. What was even more shocking was the fact that the children hadn't been murdered by anyone else, but their mother had taken their lives one by one. Why did Andrea Yates kill her children, and how did she do it? This is the case of Andrea Yates, who destroyed her perfectly happy family and shocked the entire nation with the reason why she did it. Andrea Yates was born to Andrew E.M.T. Kennedy and Judith Karen Clare. A German immigrant is Andrea Pia Kennedy in Houston, Texas, on June 2nd. 1964, she was the youngest of 5 children of Andrew and Judah. Andrea was a perfectionist, and it was quite evident when she graduated from Milby High School in 1982 as the class valedictorian and officer in the National Honor Society and captain of the school's swim team after completing a 2-year pre-nursing program at the University of Houston and graduating from the University of Texas Health Science Center. Andrea worked as a registered nurse at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center from 1986 to 1994. In 1989, Andrea Kennedy met a NASA engineer, Russell Yates. Both of them were 25 years old. At the time, the two started seeing each other, and their love grew for one another over time. On April 17, 1993, nearly 4 years after seeing each other for the first time, Andrea Kennedy and Russell Yates got married. Both Andrea and Russell were devout Christians. Therefore, soon after marrying, they announced to their friends and families they would have as many children as God would allow. A part of this thought came from the teachings of a man named Michael Wanney, who mostly preached in colleges and told the female students that they would go to hell if they continued to study, because their life purpose was only to reproduce Russell. And Andrea even purchased a 4-bedroom house in Friendswood, Texas, to accommodate their soon-to-be big family. In February 1994, the couple welcomed their first child, a son whom they named Noah. Shortly after Noah's birth, Russell accepted a job in Florida, and the family had to move to a small trailer in Seoul for some time in December. 1996, a second child, John, was born to Russell and Andrea before the birth of their third child in 1997. Paul, the Yates family, had to move back to Houston and were living in a GMC motorhome, despite being a bright student and a happy wife. Andrea had a problem. She was suffering from depression and bulimia. She even used to discuss the concept of suicide with her friends during her high school years. The symptoms of her depression disappeared for some time when she met Russell Yates and married him. But as time passed and Yates gave birth to the couple's 4th child, Luke's symptoms of depression resurfaced. The first major episode happened on June 16, 1999, when Russell found Andrea shaking and chewing her fingers, but this was just the start. The next day, Andrea attempted to take her own life by overdosing on pills. Her condition got so critical that she had to be hospitalized, and the doctors put her on antidepressants, but the medication didn't improve her condition. And soon after she was released from the hospital, she made an unusual request to Russell, and Andrea begged her husband that she should let her die, and even held a knife to her neck while she made the request. She had to be hospitalized once again, and this time the doctors gave her several medications, including an antipsychotic drug called Howal. The new medications immediately improved her condition, and she was prescribed Howdol when she was discharged from the hospital. After the incident, Russell Yates thought it might not be a good idea to live in a GMC motorhome anymore. So he moved the family into a house to help his wife recover. Initially, the change in the residence seemed to work, and Andrea's condition stabilized. However, this improvement proved to be temporary when In July 1999, Andrea Yates suffered from a nervous breakdown. As a result, she attempted to commit suicide twice and had to undergo 2 psychiatric hospitalizations that summer. After examining her, the doctors diagnosed her with postpartum psychosis. Seeing Andrea's condition, Dr. Eileen Starbranch, Andrea Yates' first psychiatrist, asked Russell Yates not to have any more children as it could worsen his wife's mental health. But just 7 weeks after Andrea was discharged from the hospital, the couple conceived their 5th child, Mary. As soon as she conceived, Andrea stopped taking Haldol to ensure a healthy pregnancy in March 2000, around the time Mary Yates was born. And for a year after, Andrea Yates' condition seemed to have improved greatly until her father died on March the 12th. 2001, she couldn't control her psychotic tendencies afterwards, which resulted in her mutilating herself and stopping to feed Mary. Her condition was so bad that the family decided to immediately hospitalize her on April 1st, 2001, and she was released after treatment, seeing his wife's unstable condition. Russell asked his mother to come live with them for a while to help with the kids, a month after being admitted to the hospital. Andrea Yates once again started showing abnormal tendencies on May 3, 2001. She filled the bathtub in the middle of the day when her mother-in-law asked her about the reason why she was filling the bathtub. Andrea told her that she might have use for it. This vague answer was frightening and made the Yates family so concerned that Russell and his mother arranged for her to be hospitalized within the next 24 hours. When the incident was shared with her psychiatrist, her thought was an attempt to commit suicide by drowning herself. Andrea was released from the hospital after a few days but was just as disoriented as before, so her husband took her back to DU Hospital and told the doctors that Andrea was no longer responding to the medications. 45 days after she showed serious catatonic tendencies and 2 days after her last appointment with her doctor, Andrea Yates did something far worse than committing suicide after her husband left for work. Andrea Yates filled the bathtub with water, took her children to the bathtub one by one, and drowned them in an apparent attempt to save them from evil. Her son Noah even tried to resist, but she put his head back in the water until he was no longer breathing. As for the youngest of her children, Mary Andrea placed her in Luke's arms, thinking that this would also reunite the two in the next world where the elder brother will be looking after his baby sister once all the kids had been drowned. Andrea Yates put their bodies under the blanket on the bed one by one as if they were resting on June 20th, 2001 at 9:48 a.m. Andrea made a 911 call and asked the operator to send an office to her house. The operator, not sure about what had happened, tried to confirm the reason for Andrea's request by asking her if she was having a disturbance, feeling ill, or if there was another reason for calling 911. Andrea Yates told the operator that she was ill. The operator, following the normal protocol, asked Yates if she needed an ambulance to take her to the hospital. Yates replied by saying that she needed a police officer at her house. The operator once again tried to determine the exact problem Andrea Yates was having, but she told the operator that she just needed the police to come to her house. Andrea's tone and her responses made the operator think it might be a cause of domestic abuse, so she tried to confirm if Andrea's husband was at home, to which Yates said no. Officer Frank Stumpo of the Houston Police Department was assigned to Andrea Yates' call, and he started driving towards her house 8 minutes after calling 911 and asking for a police officer. Andrea Yates called her husband Russell Yates at 9:56 a.m. and asked him to come home. A sudden call from Andrea, who had a long history of depression, made Russell worried, so he immediately went home when Officer Frank reached Andrea Yates' house. His colleague, Officer David, was already there and told him it was a homicide case upon entering the house. Officer Frank found Andrea Yates sitting on the couch in the living room. While entering the bedroom, he expected to see the dead body of a man, but was shocked to see 4 kids lying dead under a blanket. He was still trying to comprehend exactly what happened when he entered the bathroom and was shocked to find a 5th child floating in the bathtub. Andrea Yates had drowned all 5 of her children in the bathtub. Russell Yates arrived at his home being sealed by the police, although the quartier officers present at the scene told him what had happened. He didn't allow them to go inside and look at the bodies. Andrea Yates was immediately taken into custody, and the investigators started finding reasons why a mother would kill 5 of her children, including a 6-month-old baby. As her interviews began with the police, Andrea Yates never denied that she killed her children. She even told the investigating officers that the reason why she filled the bathtub with water was because she wanted to drown her children when the medical experts visited Andrea in the facility where she was being detained and interacted with her. They discovered that before the incident, Andrea had heard the TV talking to her. One of Andrea's religious beliefs was that the number 666 had been branded into her scalp, and since the number was Antichrist, it made Andrea think that she was a bad mother on the medical front. One of the experts was able to identify Andrea Yates' condition as cacodemomania, a belief that one is possessed by a demon. It was a rare condition that happened in people with religious delusions. Andrea loved her children, but the supposed message she was getting from the TV and her religion was that she was Satan, a bad person. Yates' psychotic tendencies soon tied with her religious beliefs, and there was no coming back. After that, some of Andrea's beliefs were also influenced by Michael W.'s writings. The preacher that Yates once followed as her condition worsened. Andrea started believing that one of her sons would become a serial killer and that the other one was going to be a homosexual prostitute. Similarly, she believed that the other 3 children were also going to end up as bad people and would go to hell for their sins. When the investigators asked Andrea if she believed she was possessed by a devil or Satan, she said she was possessed by Satan, who was giving her directions to harm the children as soon as the news of the 5 kids being found dead in a house was out. It spread like wildfire, and one name that was on everyone's lips was Andrea Yates. People were increasingly interested in knowing about one particular topic: postpartum psychosis. As for her lawyer, George Parnham, he knew that the only way Andrea was going to survive the trial was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Meanwhile, the public outrage was growing as the trial progressed and new details about the case emerged. People unaware of the effects of mental illness were harsh towards Andrea Yates, whereas the mental health experts were worried that Yates might be prosecuted. Despite a legitimate mental illness issue, Andrea Yates's actions were incomprehensible for everyone aware of the case, but it was yet to be established whether or not was mentally insane. There was no legal definition of mental insanity at the time, which meant the jurors had to use the everyday meaning of the term to decide Andrea's fate. As for the public reaction, Andrea Yates wasn't the only one being criticized for her actions. People were irked by her husband, Russell. Yates's reaction to the murders, too. The reason was that Russell Yates was defending his wife in the media and telling people that Andrea wasn't herself when she killed their children and was motivated by her mental illness. He also frequently said that Andrea was a loving and caring mother and didn't deserve to be punished for the horrific crime she had committed. The public turned furious against Russell Yates, especially after the funeral of the kids, which happened 1 week after the murders. The reason for that public anger was that he didn't show the kind of emotions a grieving father would normally show in the case of the death of his 5 children. Some people in the community even believed that he was also involved in the killings with his wife before her trial began. Andrea Yates was placed in the jail's medical facility and was treated for psychosis on the 22nd of September, 2001. 3 months after the incident, she was deemed fit to be tried for killing her children. As for Andrea Yates's trial, the state of Texas was going to try the case to the full extent of the law, and it was very clear from the opening statement that the prosecutors, who sought nothing less than the death penalty for murdering her 5 children, the prosecution also wanted to prove that Russell Yates was complicit in the incident because he had made his family live in a bus and put his children through homeschooling, which made Andrea's condition worse in February 2002. Andrea Yates's trial began. When it came to Andrea Yates and her defense, she pleaded not guilty. The reason her defense gave for pleading not guilty was insanity. While only a small number of people were excused from committing a crime because of their severe mental illness, the defense thought it had a case to make by proving that Andrea Yates was also one of those. People who at times didn't have any control over their thoughts or actions. Different prominent psychiatrists were brought in both by the prosecution and the defense to testify their arguments. Favor and make their case strong, Dr. Pardeets testified from prosecution, and Dr. Philly Resnick was brought in by the defense. The experts agreed on several points, including the fact that Andrea Yates drowned her children under the influence of a number of different mental diseases. Dr. Dietz and Dr. Resnick also agreed that Andrea believed that what she was doing while killing her children was in their best interest. The experts also thought that Andrea was well aware that drowning her children was against the law. The only difference between the test testimonies of Dr. Resnick and Dr. Dietz was that despite knowing she was doing a criminal act, she decided to proceed with it because she thought it was the right thing to do, especially for her children. Dr. Dietz also talked about where Andrea got inspiration for her actions. According to Dr. Dietz, in the week of the incident, Andrea watched an episode of the Law and Order show in which a woman frees herself from her responsibilities by drowning her children. Not only this, the woman gets away with the murder. Dietz told the report that Andrea might also have thought that she would get away with killing her children. The prosecution argued that there was a method to Andrea's act, and it wasn't all madness. The crux of Dr. Dietz's testimony was that what Andrea did was not just against the law, it was against society and against God as well. During the trial, Andrea Yates' doctor, Dr. S., was also repeatedly mentioned by Russell Yates and his family. According to the Yates family, Dr. S. played a part in the tragedy by improperly prescribing deesing her, a combination of antidepressants, a few days before the tragic incident happened. The trial went on for 3 weeks, and at the end of it, the jury deliberated for nearly 4 hours before coming out with their verdict on March 15, 2002. Andrea Yates was found guilty of murdering her 5 children despite Dr. Resnick's testimony that Andrea Yates was psychotic. Texas law required that the defendant have to prove that they could differentiate between right and wrong in order to be executed under the insanity defense. When it came to the punishment, the jury rejected the prosecution's request for the death penalty and sentenced Andrea Yates to life in prison with the possibility of parole in quarantini. Andrea fu inviata to Mount View Unit in Gatesville, Texas, which was a psychiatric prison for criminally insane convicts, 2 years after her conviction in August 2004. Andrea Yates' husband, Russell Yates, officially filed for divorce, saying that he and his wife hadn't lived together as a happy couple since Andrea murdered their 5 children. The family court granted his request for divorce in March 2005, and Russell Yates married another woman named Laura Arnold in 2006, soon after the verdict in Andrea Yates' case was announced, and the public became aware of it. The word quickly started spreading that the Law and Order episode that Dr. Dietz mentioned in his testimony did not even exist. Andrea's lawyers quickly started searching for the episode Dr. Dietz had referred to, but couldn't find any. This meant the defense had gotten a lifeline and could now ask for a retrial based on the discovery Susan O'Malley, a journalist and an author, had been covering Andrea Yates' trial for NBC News, the New York Times Magazine, and the Oprah magazine she had previously written for Law and Order, the show Dr. Dietz had mentioned in his testimony, and also reported that no such episode of the show existed. George Perum had a meeting with Law and Order's creator Dick Wolf, who told him that no episode of such sort had been aired on the show and neither had it ever been planned. Perum filed for a mistrial, but to his surprise, the motion was denied, so the defense started preparing for the appeal and reversal of the verdict. And at the center of this motion was Dr. Park Dietz's questionable testimony when Dr. Dietz was confronted by George Perum about his mention of the Law and Order show. He told him that it was an honest mistake he had made while testifying. George Perum highlighted 19 points in his request for a retrial, and based on Dr. Dietz' testimony, Andrea Yates was given another chance to have her case heard in the new trial. The defense didn't request a reduction in Andrea's sentence, but rather filed for an outright dismissal of all the charges against her, and argued it would be double jeopardy if Andrea Yates were to go through a second trial. 3 years after the original conviction in January 2005, the Texas Court of Appeals issued an opinion that double jeopardy did not apply to Andrea Yates' case. The Texas Court of Appeals also announced that despite this, a new trial would be granted to Andrea Yates because Dr. Dietz had admitted to giving false testimony during the initial trial on January 9, 2006. Another plea of not guilty by reason of insanity was entered by Andrea Yates, who requested the court to be released on bail in light of the appellate court's ruling. Andrea Yates' conviction was overturned, and she was released on bail on February 1, 2006 in light of the bail conditions. Andrea's attorney had her moved from the Mount View unit to Rusk State Hospital so she could be treated there while awaiting her second trial. Meanwhile, the defense prepared for the trial and had another important task at hand: educate the public about what exactly happened and how Andrea Yates wasn't the monster. Like the general perception was about her, Andrea's lawyers during the media interviews told people that there were 6 victims in the case. 5 were the children and 1 was Andrea herself, because she didn't have any control over herself, as her mental condition had worsened by the time the unfortunate incident happened. 5 years after the tragedy in June 2006, Andrea Yates's second trial began, and the defense focused on 2 points: mental health and wrongfulness. By this point, public opinion had also become neutral about the case. When the trial concluded in 2006, the jury deliberated for 3 days before coming to their final decision. It was one of the few trials when jurors asked for the pictures of the children murdered by Andrea and observed a 2-minute silence for each of the 5 victims, with some jurors even crying while seeing the pictures. All eyes were on the court and jury for the verdict in the retrial. After 5 years, 1 month, and 6 days, the jury, after 13 hours of deliberation, found Andrea Yates not guilty by reason of insanity. Andrea Yates's husband was happy after the verdict and told the media that the court had finally given a verdict that his wife deserved. Considering her disturbed mental condition, according to the court's verdict, Andrea Yates was placed under the jurisdiction of the Department of State Health Services and was moved to the North Texas State Hospital. She was moved to the Kernville State Hospital, a low-security mental facility where she currently resides. As for her release, there's no specific schedule for that, and she might have to spend the rest of her life in a hospital. Story 3 on the evening of October 2, 2013. Philip Chisholm's mother, Diana Chisholm, contacted the Danvers Police Department to report her son missing. She explained that Philip, a 14-year-old student at the local high school, had failed to return home after school that day. With growing concern, Diana informed the police that Philip had recently moved to Danvers from Tennessee and that she had never experienced any behavior like this from him before, recognizing the importance of locating Philip quickly. The Danvers Police Department acted swiftly. They posted a picture of Philip, along with a description of his height and weight on the department's social media networks. These posts helped spread the word about the missing student and encouraged anyone with information to come forward. Additionally, the residents of Danvers received a reverse 911 call, informing them about Philip's disappearance and providing them with crucial details about his description. While Diana Chisholm reported Philip missing, Colleen Ritzer's parents were also growing concerned about their daughter Colleen. A 24-year-old math teacher at Danvers High School never returned home after work that day, and her parents started to become worried. Colleen Ritzer was a regimented young lady and rarely deviated from her routine without letting her mother or father know. She faithfully followed a schedule. Her dedication to her work was unmatched, and her love for her students was evident in her every interaction. Officer Neil High with the Danvers Police Department was concerned about Philip Chisholm and went to check on Old Route 1 north of Danvers for the missing teen as he scoured the rural, isolated area with very little lighting. Officer High spotted a figure walking in the unsafe area on a bridge that narrowed down the dark highway at 12:28 a.m. Officer High pulled his patrol vehicle over to the side of the road and exited as Officer High stepped out. His eyes met a young man in shorts, a zip-up sweatshirt, black socks, and sneakers. Philip Chum stood there, a backpack hanging loosely over his shoulder. Officer High, a seasoned and experienced officer, noticed several alarming details about Philip Chim. First, he was alone and walking in an area that was not safe at that time of night. Second, Philip was dressed inappropriate for the weather, wearing shorts, despite the cold and damp conditions during the exchange. Philip stared past Officer High as if the police officer wasn't even there. Officer High asked Philip where he lived, and Philip replied that he had nowhere to call home, to Officer Hubby's disbelief. Philip claimed he had been wandering the streets for days. However, the officer noticed something peculiar. Philip did not appear to be disheveled or unkempt, as one would expect from someone exposed to the elements for an extended period, concerned about Philip's well-being. Officer High decided to frisk him and felt plastic in his pocket. Officer High asked Philip to empty the contents. Philip complied, and out came a driver's license, insurance card, and credit card. These documents did not belong to Philip. They belonged to Colleen Ritzer. Officer High asked Philip how he had come by the credit card. Philip claimed that he had found the card at a grocery store. However, when asked for specific details on what shop he had found the card, Philip hesitated and said he didn't know. Upon reaching the station officer, High began sorting through the contents of Philip's backpack. To his astonishment, he found several disturbing items that raised red flags inside Philip's bag. Officer High discovered a woman's purse and female underwear. Further investigation LED Officer High to uncover a box cutter covered in a reddish-brown substance, recognizing the substance as blood. The officer became deeply concerned. He cautiously asked Philip whose blood it was and was shocked when Philip responded that it was the girl's. Officer High left the room momentarily to make a necessary call to the Danvers Police Department. While he was gone, another officer remained in the room with Philip. This officer asked Philip where the girl was, and Philip replied that she was buried in the woods, concerned about the girl's well-being. The officer asked Philip if they could help her. Philip's response chilled the officer. He simply replied, "No." The officer looked over at Philip and saw that he had brown-red stains on his sweatshirt sleeves and a ski mask bunched around his neck, so the officers decided to seize Philip's clothing and sneakers while officers were dealing with Philip Chisholm. Officer Steve Baldessari headed to Danvers High School to look for Colleen Ritzer. As Officer Baldessari arrived, he began gathering information and waiting for security camera footage from the school. This footage would provide crucial insights into Colleen's whereabouts after she finished teaching for the day. Officer Baldessari met with his fellow officers to gather information and share updates. He learned the team had stumbled upon several significant clues. They discovered Colleen's bag, a recycling bin, shoes, and clothing near a running trail near the student park lot. Additionally, officers discovered Colleen's personal items in a brush near the path. Upon examining the recycling bin, the officers noticed what looked like blood. Another officer who searched the school's premises stumbled upon what looked like blood in the second-floor woman's bathroom. This location was in close proximity to Colleen's classroom, which further fueled their suspicions. Officer Baldessari, who was familiar with Philip Chisholm's appearance from social media posts about his disappearance, observed a male matching Philip's description on the footage at 2:30 p.m. The video showed Philip following Colleen Ritzer outside her classroom and strolling down the school's hallway as Officer Baldessari continued to monitor the CCTV footage. He saw Colleen Ritzer enter the floor. Philip entered behind her. His intentions unknown. Several minutes later, Philip emerged from the bathroom dressed differently from when he entered. However, another chilling detail was the mask on his face, as if attempting to disguise himself. Philip walked out of the school and into the student parking lot at 3:16 p.m. He returned to the woman's bathroom on the second floor carrying a recycling bin. After a few moments, he left the bathroom with the bin in tow, pulling it outside the school and out of the camera's view. Chillingly, Officer Baldessari never saw Colleen Ritzer leave the woman's bathroom on the second floor. When the Danvers Police Department learned that Philip Chisholm was safe, and with the police, the Massachusetts State Police took custody of the teenager. Philip was brought to the Danvers Police Department for questioning regarding the disappearance of Colleen Ritzer. In the meantime, a crime scene investigation with the Massachusetts State Police arrived at Danvers High School and started to search where the bloody recycling bin had been found. Diana Chisholm arrived at the police station and was questioned by an officer. During her interview, she expressed concerns about her son Philip's mental health. She mentioned that Philip was capable of snapping under the recent stress caused by her and her husband's separation. Additionally, Diana disclosed that there was a history of mental health issues within her family. At approximately 2 a.m., Philip Chisholm and his mother, Diana, were escorted into an interrogation room at the Danvers police station. As they entered, they were greeted by Trooper Beck here and Sergeant Philip Taney. Philip and his mother spent approximately 10 minutes speaking privately before the official interview began, while Trooper Beck here and Sergeant Taney were engaged in conversation with Philly. Officers were standing on the other side of the wall, silently feeding information to the officers. Regarding the CCTV footage, the footage had shown Philip following Colleen Ritzer into a second-floor woman's bathroom, the very one Colleen was never seen leaving and was later found covered in blood. While Philip Chisholm was being questioned, the air wing with the Massachusetts State Police and Danvers Fire Department arrived at the scene utilizing their infrared technology to scan the area for any signs of Colleen cadaver, and tracking dogs, accompanied by their skilled handlers, combed the area around Danvers High School. Philip finally confessed to the officers that he had used a karate chop to incapacitate Colleen before slicing her neck twice with a box cutter. The details of the confession were chilling. He indicated to the investigators on a map where he dumped Colleen's body in the woods behind the school, finally at around 3 a.m. A forensic scientist stumbled upon a disturbing discovery. In a dark and desolate area, they found a toe with pink nail polish poking through a small pile of leaves. The forensic scientist immediately called paramedics. To the scene, the paramedics arrived promptly and began sifting through the dirt. Their search led them to the discovery of Colleen Ritzer's lifeless body. Despite the medics' best efforts, it was evident that Colleen had passed away. Her body was carefully transported to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. Dr. Anna McDonald, a forensic pathologist, made a discovery. Male DNA had been found on Colleen's body. This DNA, when analyzed, shockingly matched the profile of none other than Philip Chisholm. Dr. McDonald discovered pichia, or small hemorrhages, around Colleen's eyes and mouth, indicating asphyxiation. Additionally, blood found on the box cutter discovered in Philip's possession matched Colleen's DNA, leading Dr. McDonald to theorize that the box cutter was used to violently assault Colleen upon examining the body. Dr. McDonald observed multiple wounds on Colleen's neck. It was evident that her neck was slashed over and over in the spot overlapping injuries. The autopsy report revealed that she had at least 16 wounds to her neck. Several of these injuries were fatal, and even the ones that weren't would have caused Colleen unimaginable pain. One of the wounds was so deep that it chipped her vertebrae. Based on the evidence, Dr. McDonald concluded that Colleen died due to sharp force injuries to her neck and asphyxia by strangulation. The severity of these injuries made it evident that this was not a random act of violence, but a deliberate act meant to cause maximum harm, as word spread around Danvers that Ken had been murdered. Everyone was shocked, especially when they learned that the prime suspect was Philip Chisholm. It seemed unfathomable that such a horrific act was committed by someone so young. Philip Chisholm was charged with aggravated sexual assault and murder. He pled not guilty to the charge. Despite Philip's young age, he was charged as an adult in relation to Colleen's murder. This decision sparked controversy and raised questions about the treatment of young offenders in the criminal justice system. Some people argued that Philip's age shouldn't have prevented him from being tried as an adult, while others believed that the severity of the crime warranted such charges. Colleen Ritzer's students were devastated by her loss. They remembered her as a compassionate and caring teacher who always went the extra mile to ensure their success. The pain of losing beloved mentor was immeasurable, and the Damers community came together to her passing to honor Colleen's memory. Candlelight vigils were held, and the Boston Red Sox had a moment of silence for Colleen. Before the opening game of the World Series, her impact was felt far and wide, as people of all walks of life came together to express their grief and support her family during this difficult time. What in the world drove Philip Chisholm to assault and murder his teacher, Colleen Ritzer? According to the New York Post, it was rumored that Philip was infatuated with his teacher and snapped when she spurned his advances. A police source spoke to the Daily Mail and revealed that one of the stories circulating was that Philip harbored a big crush on Colleen. The source said that Colleen was friendly and approachable, which might have misled Philip into misreading her kind nature and making an advance on her on a local website. Wicked Local Danvers, a classmate of Philip's, wrote after Colleen's murder that Philip was antisocial, tired, and out of it some. Students expressed concern about Philip's behavior, claiming that he frequently appeared withdrawn and disengaged. However, no one could have imagined the depths of darkness within Philip. As Philip awaited trial, a judge threw out Philip's confession, citing concerns about his Miranda rights in the presence of an attorney during questioning. Philip's defense attorneys contended that Chisholm was detained by the police for over 3 hours. Following his arrest at approximately 12:30 a.m. on October the 23rd, they asserted that Chisholm was handcuffed for the majority of that time and was not granted the opportunity to make a phone call. Moreover, they claim that Chisholm had repeatedly requested food but was denied. The judge penned a 48-page ruling saying that it was readily apparent that Philip's mother wanted an attorney present for her son's questioning. Despite Philip's waiver of his rights, the judge concluded that the court could not find, beyond a reasonable doubt, that he had knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived his Miranda rights. Crime scene investigators found cell phones belonging to Philip and Colleen, obtained through state statements. However, the court ruled that they would not be admissible as evidence. Despite this setback, other key evidence, including the contents of Philip's pockets and a bloody box cutter, will be allowed to stand trial in December 2015. Philip Chisholm went on trial for Colleen's murder. Essex County Assistant District Attorney Kate McDougall presented a strong case, arguing that Philip was focused and unwavering in his horrible plan. She maintained that Philip was not insane, but calculated and deliberate in his actions against Colleen. However, Philip's defense attorney, Denise Reagan, had a different take on the case. Denise Reagan argued that Philip was in the throes of psychosis at the time of the murder. Reagan maintained that Philip had no other reason for committing the terrible acts he did during the trial. The defense called Dr. Anthony Jackson, a forensic psychiatrist, to testify about Philip's behavior after his arrest. Dr. Jackson claimed that Philip's behavior improved after he was prescribed an antipsychotic drug. He testified that Philip's hallucinations and delusions diminished, and he seemed more alert and orientated. This evidence seemed to suggest that Philip's actions were influenced by his mental state at the time of the murder. Another notable witness, Dr. Richard Dudley, testified on behalf of the prosecution. Dr. Dudley, a psychiatrist who specializes in forensic evaluations, had observed Philip 7 times during his incarceration while he waited trial. According to Dr. Dudley, Philip heard voices and thought there was a ninja at the time of the murder. These voices, allegedly commanding him to carry out different tasks, played a significant role in Philip's decision-making process. Furthermore, Dr. Dudley alleged that Philip had been on the schizophrenia spectrum since childhood. He testified that while Philip had exhibited symptoms of schizophrenia in the past, his condition had deteriorated significantly. Leading up to the murder, schizophrenia is a mental health disorder that affects the way a person thinks, feels, and behaves. It is a chronic condition that affects about 1% of the population. People with schizophrenia may experience hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thinking, and social withdrawal. They may have difficulty distinguishing between what is real and what is not, making it difficult for them to navigate daily life. Dr. Dudley stated that Philip had recently expressed remorse for killing Colleen, saying that if he had not heard the voices, he would have never caused. However, the prosecution challenged the doctor's testimonies, alleging that Philip was fabricating or exaggerating his symptoms. They argued that his mental illness was not sufficient justification for his actions to present their case to the jury. The prosecution utilized powerful evidence, including surveillance tapes that recorded Philip following Colleen into the bathroom moments before her murder. These tapes provided crucial insights into the planning and execution of the crime. Additionally, jurors were shown graphic crime scene photos depicting the gruesome aftermath of the attack, including Colleen's gaping neck wound made by a box cutter, to further provide a deeper understanding of what happened on that fateful day. The judge and jury were allowed to visit Danvers High School, the scene of the crime. This visit gave them the opportunity to witness firsthand the areas where Ken was attacked and the murder took place. It was a situation into stark relief in a desperate attempt to sway the jury. The defense called Philip's maternal grandfather, Eduardo Barbie, to testify. Eduardo claimed that Philip's grandmother had experienced a mental breakdown in the mid-1970s and had been treated with electric shock therapy. Additionally, he informed the jury that several of his other daughters had also been treated for mental illness and spent time in psychiatric facilities. A classmate of Philip's also testified that his demeanor had undergone a significant change shortly before Colleen was killed. This classmate stated that Philly, who was once vibrant and outgoing, had changed and become quiet and withdrawn. The sudden shift in behavior raised suspicions among their peers. Despite the best efforts of Reagan, the jurors ultimately found Philip Chasm guilty of Colleen Ritzer's murder. and he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. In 40 years during the sentencing, the judge called Colleen's death brutal and senseless. The details of the murder were horrifying and a testament to the unimaginable horror that Colleen endured. One might think that Philip's life sentence would mean that he would be the last the world would ever hear of him. However, that was not the case. In 2004, at the age of 25, Philip pleaded guilty to attempted murder, assault, and battery with a dangerous weapon and kidnapping. These charges were connected to an incident that occurred in June 2014 when a Massachusetts Department of Youth Services employee accused him of attacking her in a similar manner to the way he murdered his teacher, Colleen Ritzer, 1 year earlier. The Youth Services employee claimed that Philip followed her into a bathroom, pinned her against a wall, and tried to strangle her and attack her with a pencil. This chilling revelation only further solidified the fact that Philip Chasm was a dangerous individual with a disregard for human life. After Philip pleaded guilty, he received a sentence of 17 to 20 years, in addition to the life sentence he had already received in a powerful statement. Read to the court, the surveyor of Philip's assault shared her harrowing experience. The youth service worker wrote in a letter about the fear she lived with after the attack, unable to leave her bedroom for fear that Philip was waiting for her. Her words served as a chilling reminder of the terror inflicted by Philip. Philip Chasm is now attempting to appeal his case to the highest court in Massachusetts. His attorney, Michael Schneider, has argued that there was no question Philly was the person who murdered Ken, but questions have been raised about the validity of his insanity defense. Michael Schneider claims that the evidence leading to Philip's conviction was legally insufficient, and that the judge who presided over the trial was wrong to exclude expert testimony on brain scans that would have supported Philip's claim of mental illness. One of the key aspects of Philip's appeal is the inclusion of expert testimony on brain scans. According to Michael Schneider, these scans would have shown that Philip had a mental illness at the time of the crime. By excluding this expert testimony, Schneider argues that the jury was unable to fully understand Philip's mental state at the time of the murder. The news that Philip Chasm was appealing his sentence sparked outrage among Colleen's loved ones. They expressed their anger and spoke to the media, expressing their determination to ensure that he remains behind bars. Colleen's family firmly believed that it was evident during the trial and in the jury's verdict that Philip's actions were premeditated, calculated, and committed on pure evil. To them, the overwhelming evidence was crystal clear, leaving no room for doubt. One of the most frustrating aspects for Colleen's family and friends was that Philip had never shown any remorse. Philip's lack of remorse only further reinforced for their conviction that he cannot possibly be rehabilitated. The thought of him potentially being eligible for parole if he is resentenced is something that they find unthinkable in their eyes. Colin and their family were not afforded a second chance, and it is unimaginable that they would have to reconsider the possibility of reducing this convicted murderer sentence for Colleen's loved ones. The idea that justice would not be served is unimaginable. They believe that the guilty verdict and the maximum possible sentence were well-deserved. It is unfathomable to them that the perpetrator would even be considered for a lesser sentence to them. It is yet another painful reminder of the immense loss they have suffered following the murder of Colleen Ritzer. Teachers across the country experienced heightened fear and anxiety. The realization that one of their own could be targeted and harmed by a student brought a sense of vulnerability and insecurity to the profession. Teachers who previously felt confident that they were in a relatively safe environment were now forced to reevaluate their safety measures and implement additional precautions to protect themselves and their students in response to the concerns raised by Colleen Ritter's murder. Schools across the United States implemented enhanced security measures to protect teachers and staff. These measures included increased video surveillance systems, lockdown procedures, and stricter access controls. Schools also employed trained security personnel and implemented regular safety drills to prepare students and staff for potential emergencies. Those efforts aim to create a more secure environment and minimize the risk of similar incidents in the future. The murder of Colleen Ritzer also heightened teachers' vigilance and awareness. Educators became more attuned to their students' potential warning signs and behaviors. Teachers reported being more cautious in their interactions with students, more aware of their surroundings, and seeking assistance from school authorities when necessary. This increased vigilance aimed to prevent similar acts of violence from occurring and to ensure the safety of everyone on campus. Colleen's murder also raised concerns about teachers' safety when interacting with students. Teachers expressed fears that they could be targeted or physically harmed if a student became violent or hostile. In response to this concern, schools implemented training programs for educators to de-escalate potentially violent situations and report problems to authorities. Additionally, teachers received guidance on how to protect themselves during one-on-one interactions with students. Story 4, Jason Corbett was part of a large Irish family growing up in Limerick, Ireland, with his twin brother Wayne and his older sister Tracy. The Corbett household was always filled with laughter, mischief, and love. Jason, known for his outgoing and boisterous nature, was the loud twin often heard before he was seen at 27. Jason married his first wife, Margaret Maggs Fitzpatrick. The couple was overjoyed when they welcomed their first child, Jack, into the world. 2 years later, they welcomed their second child, Sarah, and completed the family they had always dreamed of, with their prince and princess finally arriving. Jason and Maggs were overjoyed and felt their family was complete. They were excited for the future and cherished every moment with their young children. However, their happiness was short-lived when tragedy struck. In 2006, Maggs, a longtime asthmatic, suffered a bad attack during the night in a panic. Jason called emergency services and an ambulance rushed her to the hospital. Tragically, Maggs passed away in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Jason, who was 30 years old at the time, was devastated by the loss of his wife. His 2 young children, Jack and Sarah, were only 2 and 12 weeks old. It was an incredibly challenging time for him as he faced the daunting task of raising his children on his own. Despite the overwhelming grief, Jason knew that he had to pick up the pace and continue moving forward for the sake of his children. 1 year after Mag's death, Jason needed help with his children. Jack and Sarah, he decided to seek help through an au pair and posted an advertisement on the internet. Molly Martins, a young nanny from Knoxville, Tennessee, caught his attention. Having grown up babysitting, she harbored a deep passion for working with children. Molly had briefly studied at university but felt a strong desire for a new chapter in her life. She was looking for an adventure and believed working as an au pair in Ireland would provide just that. In March 2008, Molly arrived in Limerick, ready to start her new adventure from the moment she met Jack and Sarah. She connected with them effortlessly, her love for children was evident, and Jason couldn't help but notice how at ease his children seemed to be around her as time passed. The relationship between Jason and Molly evolved from a professional one into something more personal. Their love for each other grew, and those who were close to Jason couldn't help but notice how happy the couple seemed. The sadness that once consumed Jason had been replaced with a new joy. Molly's presence in Limerick had brought new life into Jason's world. After 2 years together, Jason and Molly began discussing their future on Valentine's Day. 2010, Jason proposed to Molly at one of their favorite restaurants in Limerick. The couple was happy and celebrated their engagement with friends and family with a champagne toast. Molly, overjoyed to be engaged to Jason, wholeheartedly embraced the role of his future wife. She treated Jack and Sarah as if they were her own Molly, and Jason had been dating for several years. When the couple decided to tie the knot, their family supported their relationship and were thrilled when the couple got engaged. Yet everything changed after Jason's loved ones arrived in America for his and Molly's wedding. The Molly that they had known in Limerick seemed to have changed. She was acting weird, controlling, and angry, and did not seem like the blushing, happy bride they had expected throughout the wedding weekend. Molly barely left her room and did not socialize with anyone. This behavior puzzled Jason's family, as they had always been under the impression that Molly and Jason were deeply in love one day. One of the bridesmaids approached Jason's family and revealed that Molly had confided in her that Molly had once been close friends with Maggs, Jason's deceased wife. Before Maggs died from cancer, this information shocked Tracy. Jason's sister Maggs had not died from cancer, as Molly had claimed she had passed away from an asthma attack. Furthermore, Molly absolutely did not know. Maggs Tracy, who had been friends with Molly for years, began to question if her brother should marry her. As the weekend progressed, Molly's behavior continued to deteriorate. She seemed distant and disinterested in the wedding preparations. Jason's family was concerned. They tried to understand why Molly had lied about knowing Mags. Several of Jason's friends felt the same way Tracy did and questioned whether Jason should marry Molly. One of them, a groomsman at his wedding, told Jason it was not too late to walk away from this and return to Ireland. However, Jason said he couldn't. He had made a commitment to Molly and he was going to follow through with it. As the wedding day arrived, tensions ran high. Jason's family watched from afar as Molly stood by his side. They hoped for the best, but couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The wedding ceremony passed without incident, but the aftermath left more questions than answers. Jason's family remained concerned about their future and pondered whether Molly was truly the right person for Jason. After Molly and Jason married, they settled with Jack and Sarah in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. From the outside, looking in, the Corbett family appeared to be the ideal blended family. Molly seamlessly fit in with Jason and his children, or so it seemed according to Tracy. Jason expressed the desire to return to Ireland, but understood the challenges of leaving. Molly Jason was homesick and missed rugby, which he was a huge fan of. Rugby is a sport deeply rooted in Irish culture, and being away from it made Jason long for his homeland even more. He missed the feeling of being part of the rugby community and the camaraderie that came with it. Jason was also a huge fan of Irish culture in general. He loved the traditions, music and language unique to Ireland. The vibrant atmosphere and the warmth of the Irish people left a lasting impression on Jason, and he cherished the memories he had from his time there. Although Jason liked his neighbors, and Winston-Salem in his neighborhood, it wasn't Ireland. Winston-Salem, North Carolina was the place it took him after he left Ireland, but it didn't have the same connection to him. Jason missed his familiarity and sense of belonging in his hometown in Ireland. Jason always intended to return to his homeland with his children. He deeply loved his country and wanted it to be a part of his children's lives. It was important for Jason to raise his children as teenagers in Ireland. Molly had been the only mother that Jack and Sarah had ever known, and Jason believed that Molly loved his children. However, he also clarified that he did not want Molly to adopt Jack. And Sarah Jason expressed concerns about Molly's erratic behavior and the lies she told about his first wife in 2015. The tension in the relationship between Molly and Jason reached its peak on August 2nd, 2015 at around 2 a.m. Tom Martins, Molly's father and a 30-year veteran of the FBI, made a call to 911. In his call, he stated that his daughter Molly and her husband Jason were involved in a physical altercation. Tom further said that he had intervened and believed Jason was in bad shape. When the dispatcher questioned Tom regarding what he meant by bad shape, Tom confessed that he feared he may have killed Jason. The dispatcher immediately dispatched police officers and an ambulance to the Corbett household, where they arrived to find Jason dead in the bedroom. Both Molly and her father, covered in blood, were at the scene. Molly and Tom were taken to the police department, where detectives interviewed them about what happened. Tom explained to the detectives that he was staying at his daughter Molly's home. He stated that before he went to bed, he noticed his son-in-law Jason was drunk. Tom heard a commotion coming from their second story and decided to investigate. According to Tom, he grabbed a metal Little League baseball bat that he had purchased for his grandson Jack as a gift and headed upstairs to find out what was going on. When he arrived at Molly and Jason's bedroom, he found Jason with hands wrapped around Molly's throat, squeezing tightly. Tom told the detective that he had told Jason let her go, but Jason had not. He claimed Jason told him, "I'm going to kill her," at that moment. Tom said he felt his parental instinct kick in and decided to intervene. He raised the baseball bat and hit Jason with it. Tom explained that Jason was bigger than him and that Jason was able to grab the bat. He stated that Jason pushed him to the ground so hard that his glasses flew off. Tom told the detectives that he was terrified that Jason was going to kill him and his daughter Molly. When he regained control of the baseball bat, he said he hit Jason repeatedly until Jason went down. During the interview, Tom described Jason as crazy. He also acted jovial with the detectives, nonchalantly answering questions as if being interviewed for the killing of his son-in-law was no big deal. Meanwhile, in a separate interview room, detectives also questioned Molly. Her story matched her father's, stating that she picked up a paving stone that was sitting on her nightstand and hit Jason. As he was attacking her father, the detective asked why there was a paving stone in Molly's bedroom. She replied that she and the children were planning to repaint the bricks and plant flowers around the mailbox at the police department. Molly and Tom's bodies were photographed and they were released. Tracy was stunned when she received the news of her brother's death. The news came as an even greater shock when she discovered that he was killed by his wife Molly and father-in-law Tom in an alleged act of self-defense. However, Tracy knew this was impossible. Her brother Jason would never harm anyone. Jason was a kind-hearted and gentle individual determined to uncover the truth. Tracy reached out to Molly, her brother's wife, hoping to talk to her niece and nephew. However, Molly ignored her calls and messages, leaving Tracy feeling even more desperate. She feared for the safety of her niece and nephew, Jack and Sarah, and believed that Molly had intentionally killed Jason, knowing that Jason had named her as the legal guardian of Jack and Sarah in the event of his death. Tracy made the difficult decision to fly from Ireland to North Carolina. She filed a petition to gain custody of her niece and nephew, knowing that Molly had also filed for custody in the days following Jason's death. Molly made allegations of abuse in their relationship. A friend of Molly spoke to and claimed that she had seen Jason control Molly, calling her names and engaging in abusive behavior. Molly had also confided in the friend, stating that Jason had forced her into having intercourse against her will. However, Molly never reported any abuse to the police, and Tracy, Jason's sister, didn't think any of it was true. As the case unfolded, Tracy's fears intensified. She was convinced that Jason's death was no accident, and that Molly posed a threat to Jack and Sarah with the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Tracy was determined to protect her brother's children and fight for their right to a safe and nurturing future. For days after Jason passed away, Jack and Sarah were interviewed by a social worker regarding their account of what happened the night Jason passed away. In their respective statements, both Jack and Sarah corroborated Molly's claim that Jason was abusive. Jack even went as far as saying that he witnessed several instances of domestic violence with his own eyes. The children were placed with Molly after Jason died, since the court granted her emergency custody. When Jason's sister heard the news that Jack and Molly alleged Jason was abusive, she suspected that Molly or someone in Molly's family had coached Jack and Sarah on what answers to provide to the social workers. Regarding Jason and Molly's marriage, the court decided that Jack and Sarah were to be removed from Molly's care and should go with Tracy. After the medical examiner autopsied Jason's body, it was released to his sister, Tracy, then arranged for the body to be flown from the U.S. to Ireland. This transportation was arranged through the Kevin Bell Reputation Trust. The Kevin Bell Reputation Trust is a charitable organization named after a man who passed away abroad under tragic circumstances. It was established to assist families and friends with financial assistance in repatriating the bodies of loved ones who passed away while abroad. This trust aims to alleviate some of the financial burden associated with such arrangements by offering financial aid. Tracy, Jack, and Sarah returned to Limerick, Ireland 2 weeks later. Molly, on the other hand, was devastated by the decision, unable to function properly. Molly would desperately contact Jack and Sarah, attempting to contact them through various means. She would frequently post messages on Facebook, reaching out to people she knew in Limerick, pleading with them to pass messages along to the children, according to Tracy. In the months following their return to Limerick, Molly would repeatedly call, constantly trying to reach Jack and Sarah. Tracy didn't feel she was being cruel by keeping Molly from the children. She said Molly forfeited the right to see Jack and Sarah when she killed their father. An autopsy determined that Jason had suffered over a dozen blows to the head, leading authorities to open a murder investigation. Despite the detective's initial assessment that Jason's death appeared to be in self-defense, the case took an unexpected turn 5 months after his death, when Molly and Tom Martins were arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The arrest came as a relief to Jason's friends and family, who had been seeking justice. They believed that Molly had murdered Jason after discovering his intentions to leave her and take Jack and Sarah back to Limerick. Jason's loved ones thought that Molly had been plotting to take his children away from him for a long time. During the investigation, detectives obtained recordings of arguments between Jason and Molly, which they believed to be an attempt to manipulate the situation in custody proceedings. It was suspected that Molly had intended to use the recordings against Jason, Jack, and Sarah settled well in Limmer with their Aunt Tracy and started to see a therapist. 9 months after Jack and Sarah arrived in Ireland, Jack made a startling revelation. He recanted the initial statement that he had given to the social worker in the days after his father's death. This time, Jack claimed that Molly made up the stories that Jason was abusive. Jack alleged that Molly told him if he did not lie to the social workers, he and Sarah would never see her again. His reason for coming forward was that he finally learned the truth about what happened to his father and sought justice. When Molly and Tom went on trial, the prosecution presented evidence gathered from the scene during the trial of Molly. And in Tom, the prosecution presented evidence to determine that neither Molly nor Tom had sustained any injuries on the night of Jason's death. They argued that the lack of evidence of injuries on their bodies indicated they had not been involved in a physical struggle with a person of Jason's size. The prosecution argued that if there had been any such struggle, there would have been evidence of it on their bodies. In the form of bruises and cuts, a blood spatter expert testified for the prosecution and bolstered their theory that Jason was attacked to act when he was defenseless by Molly and Tom. This expert showed evidence that Tom had been standing over Jason swinging the baseball bat while Jason was no longer a threat. The expert's testimony supported the prosecution's theory that Tom had intentionally inflicted injuries on Jason. The prosecutor presented evidence indicating that Molly would have received Jason's $600,000 life insurance policy in the event of his death. This was used as a motive to support the accusation that she murdered him when it came to time for Molly and Tom to present their defense. They showed an image of Molly taken on the night Jason was killed. In this image, there was a noticeable red mark on Molly's neck. However, the prosecution presented an expert who testified that the redness on Molly's neck could be the result of rubbing and pulling on it. Several first responders had noticed Molly engaging in this behavior on the night of Jason's death. However, the defense presented their own expert witness who argued that the red mark on Mole's neck could be evidence of strength triangulation. According to the expert's scratches behind Molly's ears, a complaint of trouble swallowing and a sore throat were signs of strangulation. This expert also claimed that Molly urinated on herself as Jason choked her, stating that this is a common phenomenon that can occur if a person passes out from lack of oxygen. The defense called as a witness a nurse practitioner who examined Jason 2 weeks before his death. This nurse practitioner testified that Jason had informed her that he often experienced sudden bursts of anger and felt stressed. According to the defense, the nurse practitioner testimony showed that Jason had been experiencing volatile mood swings during the trial. Tom took the witness stand in his defense and testified that he felt his life and Molly's were in danger on the night of Jason's death. As a result, he claimed that he did the best he could in order to defend himself. Tom told the jury that once he gained control of the bat back from Jason, he hit Jason until he deemed the threat to be over, which occurred when Jason fell to the floor. The prosecutor, seeking to make a significant impact during his closing arguments, decided to display the bat and paving stone that Molly and Tom had used to hit Jason in the head, resulting in his death. This demonstration aimed to bring the case to life for jury, allowing them to physically witness the weapons used to commit the crime. After 9 days of testimony, the jury finally had the opportunity to deliberate. The jury only needed 3 hours to reach a verdict. They found Molly and Tom Martins guilty of Jason Corbett's murder. Ultimately, Molly and Tom were sentenced to serve 2 to 25 years to life in prison, reflecting the severity of their offense. As Molly was sentenced, she turned to face her mother and said, "I'm so sorry." Her voice was filled with regret and remorse. She continued, "I should have just let him kill me." Molly and Tom appealed their conviction in 2020. An appeal court nullified the convictions and ordered a retrial, asserting that certain evidence excluded from their initial trial should have been presented to the jury. The decision to appeal was upheld in 2021 by the North Carolina Supreme Court. Following the appeal, Molly and Tom were released on bail, pending a retrial. During the pretrial hearings, Molly and Tom's defense made serious allegations against Mags, Jason's first wife. They claimed that Mags did not die from an asthma attack as previously thought, but instead tried to push the possibility that Mags was strangled. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. In fact, there has never been any evidence to suggest that Mags died from anything other than an asthma attack. Additionally, there has never been any evidence of foul play, and Jason has never been investigated. Eventually, Molly and Tom accepted a plea deal for charges of voluntary manslaughter in exchange for having the murder charges dropped. The judge sentenced them to a minimum of 51 months in prison with credit for time served. Molly and Tom were released in June 2024, which upset Jason's family. The news that Molly and Tom were to be released brought back all the pain and anger they had experienced after Jason died. Jason's loved ones felt that the justice system had failed them. They questioned why Molly and Tom had been granted freedom when they committed such a heinous crime. Jack and Sarah Corbett spoke at the sentencing hearing and described their stepmother Molly as a monster. They painted a picture of a woman who had not only neglected and abused them, but had also manipulated them into lying about their father, Sarah. In particular, expressed deep resentment towards Molly for taking away her childhood and her relationship with her father. She accused Molly of exploiting their vulnerability and using them as pawns in her twisted game. In contrast to Sarah's accusations, Molly expressed remorse for her actions. She stated that she regrets the events that led to Jason's death every day. Molly acknowledged the pain she had caused Jack and Sarah and wished she could turn back the clock and make things right. However, Molly's remorse did little to absolve her in the eyes of her stepchildren. Jack and Sarah continued to harbor anger toward her and accused her of betraying their family. Sarah stated that she would never get back the father she lost, and Molly's regret would never fill the void left by his absence. Story 5. Imagine a heartwarming tale of family reunion filled with joy and hope. But what if this idyllic scenario took a dark and twisted turn? This case is a chilling reminder that even the most innocent-looking relationships are in fact the most disturbing meat. Stephen and Katie, father and daughter, their lives intertwined by fate and circumstance. Their unusual family relationship hidden from the world would soon become the center of a tragic saga. What begins as a seemingly ordinary story of family reunion would soon take a horrifying turn. The unexpected twists and turns of their lives would lead to consequences that no one could have imagined, forever altering the course of their destinies. On April 12, 2018, a seemingly ordinary day turned into a nightmare for the Platt family. Stephen and Katie Platt, father and daughter, were at the center of a horrifying series of events that would forever change not only their lives, but the lives of those around them. Hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary lives, a forbidden love affair had unfolded between Stephen and Katie, an evil family truth, and how it could stay hidden. It had to come out, and when it did, it made every living soul question the basics of the most pure relationships humans have. They understood that this was not the right approach, and their actions led to catastrophic consequences. Quite contrary to what they had anticipated, there would be a series of events that would till the end serve as a tragedy in the lives of the affected one. Join us as we dive into the chilling tale of Stephen and Katie Platt. Stephen Platt came from a relatively ordinary upbringing in New York. Little is known about his childhood or adolescence, but it was during his young adulthood that his life took a dark turn in 1995. At the age of 20, Stephen met Alyssa Garcia, a 15-year-old girl, online. Despite the age difference, they quickly formed a bond and had an immediate connection. Despite Alyssa's young age, Stephen was drawn to her, and their relationship blossomed into a secret romance. Alyssa, a sophomore in high school, was swept away by Stephen's charms and attention. Innocent as she was, she could not see through the manipulative tactics was employing to groom her. Stephen carefully cultivated their relationship, keeping it hidden from Alyssa's family and friends. He was so driven by his desires that he went from New York all the way to Texas to meet her. Their relationship grew increasingly intense, culminating in Alyssa running away from home to be with Stephen in New York. She cut off ties with her family and friends, blinded by her love for him. Katie, born Denise Platt in 1998, was the product of Alyssa and Stephen's relationship when Alyssa got pregnant at the age of 16. As a young child, Katie experienced firsthand the abuse and neglect inflicted on her by her father. When she was born in 1998, it quickly became evident that Stephen exhibited concerning traits that would foreshadow the violence to come, according to Alyssa, Denise's mother. Stephen's abuse tendencies emerged almost immediately. Alyssa recounted harrowing details of Stephen's treatment of their infant daughter. He would do things like cover her mouth when she would cry. He pinched her all over her body until she turned black and blue. The abuse escalated to the point where Stephen, overwhelmed by Denise's cries, resorted to placing her in a cooler or ice chest to silence her. Sometimes he would leave a blanket slightly ajar to keep a crack open, but other times he would shut it completely. Forcing Alyssa to wait outside when she was finally allowed to open it, Alyssa would find Denise gasping for air, drenched in sweat and covered in bruises. Alyssa, realizing the danger Stephen posed to Katie, made the heartbreaking decision to place her daughter for adoption. She knew it was the only way to ensure Katie's safety and give her a chance at a better life. She wanted her daughter to have a future filled with love and safety qualities that were glaringly absent in her home. With Stephen, Alyssa's fears for Denise's well-being overshadowed her own maternal instincts, leading her to believe that relinquishing her parental rights was the best choice. Katie, whose name was changed from Denise at the time of her adoption, was taken in by the loving Fusco family. They provided her with a stable and supportive home. She grew up surrounded by love and encouragement, unaware of the dark secret that connected her to her biological parents. Despite the challenges and abuse, Alyssa and Stephen remained together. They eventually married in 2006. After Stephen moved to Richmond, Virginia in 2016, Katie, now an adult, felt a growing desire to learn more about her biological family, driven by curiosity and a long longing. For answers, she embarked on a journey to find her birth parents through social media. She managed contact with Alyssa, her biological mother, with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Katie reached out to Alyssa, sending her a message. Expressing her desire to connect, Alyssa, who had been searching for Katie for years, was overjoyed to receive her message. After months of online communication, Katie decided to visit Alyssa in North Carolina. The reunion was a bittersweet moment filled with both joy and uncertainty. Katie met her biological mother for the first time, and they quickly formed a bond. Following the reunion, Katie made a difficult decision to take a gap year from college and move to North Carolina to live with her biological family. This decision was met with mixed reactions from her adoptive parents, who were supportive but also concerned about the potential challenges she might face. Alyssa's excitement was tempered by the living arrangements within the household. Stephen, Katie's biological father, was sleeping on the couch, while Alyssa occupied the bedroom. Katie was given her own room, but she spent most of her time with Stephen and her two younger sisters at the time when Katie decided to move in with her biological family in August 2016. Stephen and Alyssa were already separated and sleeping in different rooms. Katie, unaware of her father's past, quickly developed a close bond with him. She spent most of her days at home with him and her two younger sisters. Alyssa, overjoyed with her firstborn, was happy to have Katie living with them. However, she soon noticed concerning changes in Stephen's behavior. He began dressing differently, wearing tight clothes and growing his hair out, seemingly in an attempt to look younger and close to Katie's age. 6 weeks after Katie's arrival, Alyssa discovered that Stephen was no longer sleeping on the couch, but had moved to the floor of Katie's bedroom, a move that deeply unsettled her. Alyssa confronted Stephen about his inappropriate behavior, reminding him of his violent past and warning Katie to be cautious around him. However, Katie brushed off her concerns, believing that Stephen had changed and that she could trust him. This response revealed the extent to which Katie had already been manipulated and groomed by her father. Alyssa's unease grew as she noticed the striking physical similarities between Katie and her younger self. One day, she could no longer ignore the disturbing dynamic between Stephen and Katie. She confronted them both, sparking a heated argument that ended with Stephen and Katie storming out of the house together. 3 months later, in November 2016, Alyssa gathered the courage to leave Stephen, taking her two daughters with her and filing for divorce. This decision left Stephen and Katie alone in the house, free to explore their twisted desires without interference. In May 2017, Alyssa made a shocking discovery while cleaning her 11-year-old daughter's room. The girl's journal revealed that Stephen and Katie were sexually involved, that Katie was pregnant with St. Seat's child, and that the two children had been told to refer to Katie as their stepmother. The journal entry stated she is pregnant and gained weight, and my dad calls her baby. Also his baby. Did he make her pregnant? My dad says that she's my stepmom, WTF. He doesn't even want me to call her sister anymore, but in nature, she's only my sister. Does she see me as a daughter or a sister? Katie now tells me sometimes to get the F up. Alyssa immediately confronted Stephen, who confirmed the relationship and Katie's pregnancy. She was horrified and called the police to report the incestuous relationship. Stephen admitted to Alyssa that he'd been head over heels in love with Katie and that this feeling had outweighed the issue of them being biologically related. Despite the ongoing police investigation, Stephen and Katie continued their relationship on July 20th. 2017, they got married and parked in Maryland, lying on their marriage documents about their relation. The wedding was attended by Stephen's mother and Katie's adoptive parents, who were aware of the situation but felt powerless to intervene. In September 2017. Katie gave birth to her and Stephen's son, Bennett. Kieran Paddle, the couple moved to a house in Knightdale, North Carolina, hoping for a fresh start. However, their happiness was short-lived. In January 2018. Stephen and Katie were arrested and charged with incest. Despite their charges, they were released on bond but were ordered to have no contact with each other. Custody of Bennett was granted to Stephen's mother, and Katie moved back in with Tony and Kelly Fusco, her adoptive parents. She informed Stephen over the phone that she did not want to continue their relationship after being released on bail. Stephen and Katie were subjected to a court order prohibiting them from having contact with each other. This separation forced Katie to return to New York, while Stephen was barred from North Carolina and was living in a hotel room in Virginia. However, on March 16, 2018, the restrictions were lifted, allowing Stephen to return to his home in North Carolina, which was conveniently located near his mother, Grace, who had custody of their son, Bennett. As the days passed, the emotional strain of their situation weighed heavily on both Stephen and Katie. On April 12, 2018. A pivotal moment occurred when Katie called Stephen and informed him of her decision to end their relationship. She expressed her desire for a divorce, stating that the relationship had become toxic and was taking a toll on her well-being. Katie articulated her need to reclaim her life, pursue her interest in art and digital advertising, which she wanted to study in college, and ultimately to break free from the unhealthy dynamic that had ensnared her. This decision was a significant turning point for Katie, as the distance from Stephen allowed her to reflect on the gravity of their situation. She began to recognize the manipulation and control that had defined their relationship. However, Stephen did not take the news lightly. Enraged by Katie's declaration, he exploded in a fit of anger, feeling betrayed and rejected. This emotional turmoil ignited a dangerous desire for revenge, as Stephen sought to retaliate against Katie for what he perceived as her abandonment. Stephen's motivation for his subsequent actions were deeply rooted in a mix of anger, jealousy, and a desperate need to exert control. His history of violent outbursts and unpredictable behavior suggested that he was prone to extreme emotional reactions. The prospect of losing Katie, whom he had groomed and manipulated, triggered a visceral response in his mind. Katie's decision to leave him was not just a rejection, it was a personal affront that he felt compelled to avenge. The psychology of revenge played a significant role in Stephen's mindset. Research indicates that individuals acting out of anger or jealousy often engage in retaliatory aggression, driven by an intrinsic desire to restore the perceived balance of power. For Stephen, the thought of Katie moving on without. Stephen left Bennett dead at home. A tragic reminder of the violence that had unfolded. Stephen's confession revealed the depth of his turmoil as he described the murders and the tragic fate of their infant son, Bennett, whom he'd also killed earlier that day. After hanging up the phone, Stephen even drove to New York, where he parked his minivan in a secluded area. The weight of his actions pressed heavily on him, and as the reality of his situation set in, he realized there was no escape from the consequences of his violent spree. In a final act of desperation, Stephen took a firearm and ended his own life. The self-inflicted gunshot wound marked the tragic conclusion to a tragedy that had spiraled out of control, leaving a trail of devastation and heartbreak. The community was left to grapple with the aftermath of the violence, mourning the loss of Katie, Anthony, and Bennett, and reflecting on the tragic circumstances that led to such a horrific end. Following the tragic events of April 12, 2018, the investigation into the murders of Katie Platt and Anthony Fusco, as well as the death of their infant son, Bennett, quickly unfolded. The Endale Police Department and the New Milford Police Department worked in tandem to piece together the harrowing details of the case. The investigation began with a wear check at Stephen Padd's residence in Knightdale, North Carolina, after his mother Grace expressed concern over the comments he had made during a phone call which he made around 8:45 a.m. On the same day when the police arrived at the home, they discovered the lifeless body of a 7-month-old Bennett Platt hidden in a closet. The circumstances surrounding his death were grim, and authorities quickly suspected foul play. Simultaneously, police in New Milford responded to reports of a shooting at an intersection where Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony, were found dead in their vehicle. Witnesses described the horrific scene as Stephen's blue minivan pulled up alongside the pickup truck, and he opened fire with an AR-15-style rifle, striking both victims multiple times. The evidence collected from both crime scenes, including ballistic analysis and witness statements, painted a clear picture of the tragic events that had transpired with Stephen Platt, deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There were no further legal proceedings against him. However, the investigation revealed the complex background of the family dynamics that led to these murders. Stephen and Katie had been arrested earlier in January 2018 on charges of incest adultery and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Both had been released on bail, but conditions prohibited them from contacting each other. Elisa Platt, Stephen's ex-wife and Katie's biological mother, expressed her anger and frustration over the court's decision to allow Stephen access to Bennett. She believed that the system had failed to protect the child, stating if anyone is brought up on charges of incest, they should never be allowed near minor children. Elisa also criticized the lack of a psychiatric evaluation for Stephen before his release, highlighting the need for mental health assessments in cases involving such severe allegations as the investigation unfolded. The legal complexities of the case became evident. Stephen's defense attorney, Rick Friedman, noted that the case was unprecedented and posed unique challenges for the legal system. He argued that Stephen and Katie's relationship was consensual, disputing claims that Katie had been manipulated or brainwashed by her father. Despite the absence of a trial, the evidence gathered during the investigation suggested a pattern of control and manipulation that had characterized Stephen's relationship with both Katie and Elisa. The tragic outcome of these dynamics led to a chilling conclusion, with multiple lives lost and a community left in shock with Stephen Platt's death. There was no trial verdict or sentencing to be rendered. The case concluded with the tragic realization that the legal system had been unable to prevent the horrific events that transpired. Elisa Platt, while grappling with her own feelings of guilt and sorrow, continued to advocate for awareness around domestic violence and the complexities of family abuse. She emphasizes the importance of recognizing the signs of manipulation and control in relationships, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The aftermath of this case serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise from unchecked family relationships and the critical need for vigilance in protecting vulnerable individuals from harm. The Stephen and Katie Platt case ignited a wave of shock and outrage across social media and news platforms. Many expressed disbelief at the circumstances that led to the murders and subsequent suicide, questioning how such manipulation and abuse could escalate to such violence. Commoners criticized the legal system for failing to protect the innocent, particularly in the light of the evident signs of abuse. Elisa Platt, Katie's biological mother, became a voice for the victims, lamenting the systemic failures that allowed this tragedy to unfold. The case sparked decisions about the need for better mental health evaluations and protective measures for vulnerable individuals. The disturbing case of Stephen and Katie Platt came into focus in an episode titled Murders in the Family from the true crime series Sex, Lies, and Murder. This episode delved into the complex dynamics of their incestuous relationship, exploring how Stephen's abusive past and manipulative behavior led to tragic outcomes through chilling reenactments and interviews. The episode examines the emotional turmoil faced by the victims and the systemic failures that allowed the abuse to escalate. Unfortunately, it serves as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked manipulation and family violence as the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Sherlock Holmes. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you, for